Okay, good morning everyone. Lovely to have this shiur again. We are on page 204 in the new paragraph, and this is a very exciting paragraph. A lot of Kabbalah is based upon this concept which we'll discuss. A lot of the Ari Kabbalah. V'hinei, behold, Ahadut HaBorei Yitbarach, the unity of God, blessed be He, who nir'eh v'nikar b'chol hanivreim, is able to be recognized and seen in all creatures. In other words, by looking at the whole world, you can actually see the DNA of God, the signature of God in the whole world. V'hainu, which means, ka'asher ha'adam mitbonen b'ha'olam v'hanivreim, and when man ponders and meditates in the world and its creatures, the wondrousness of creation, and how all of the things come so exacting together, he can actually recognize the divine light and energy that animates everything. He actually can see, if not in his physical eye, then at least in his mind's eye, when one ponders. I often, I like to, from time to time, when I have the opportunity, I haven't had that for a while, but I like to see David Edinburgh's The World of Plants. And sometimes you see it more in plants than you do in animals, although animals is even more so. But you see how everything is so exacting and so detailed. And I know that David Edinburgh doesn't believe in God, but when I see it, it just enhances my wondrousness and more belief in God even greater, and how everything is so exacting that this particular bird, his beak is shaped exactly to fit into this, to this particular flower that gives it life, and also is able to pollinate then another flower and cause it to reproduce. It is so exacting and so specific that it is unbelievable. What is funny is that David Edinburgh sometimes says that the particular bird or the particular insect had to develop or adapt and develop a particular beak in order to be able to adapt to this particular flower that exists in a particular place and thus live. But my question is how did it live before it changed its beak or particular shape? How did it get its sustenance until then? Surely it would have died. All of a sudden, after hundreds or thousands or millions of years, it changed its beak to be able to fit into that exactly. I mean, obviously, from my point of view, it didn't make sense. It just further enhanced how God created everything so exacting and precise that everything fits. Every pot has its lid that fits precisely. So if you're not able to see it physically with your physical tangible eye, i.e., that you look and you ponder and you see, you certainly are able to see it with your mind's eye through meditation and through pondering and analysis. It's interesting to note that one time there was a great rabbi. I'm saying the story in reference to being able to see it with our own eyes. Now, when we mention seeing it in our own eyes, it does not necessarily mean that we actually can see the divine spark, but we can certainly see the life behind every creature. Of course, there are high levels in that, where, as I mentioned in last week's shiur, that the righteous are able to actually see the divine spark and connect to the divine spark itself. In a similar vein, an interesting story I read many years ago, that a particular rabbi migrated to Israel, and of course in those days journeys and migration and changing place of living, it was fraught with a lot of difficulties and danger. And he finally came to the land of Israel. And he was extremely happy. And one time he made a big seudah after many, many years of being in the land of Israel. And he was extremely joyous, and they asked him, why the seudah? Why are you making a festive meal? What is the occasion of the joy? And he said, I want to tell you a story. Many years ago, I always loved and desired to come to the land of Israel. And one time there was an emissary that came from the land of Israel, and I asked him, please tell me tell me about the land of Israel. And he described its beauty, its splendor, and he also described its spirituality besides the historical aspects. The fact that Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov are buried there, Yosef, and etc., the 12 tribes, the sages of the Mishnah, the sages of the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Holy Arizal, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and many, many, many great tzaddikim. But he also described its spiritual qualities. As it says in the Gemara, Avira de Eretz Israel Mahkima, the very air of the land of Israel is brings wisdom to a person. And in fact, we know according to Kabbalah, it says that Eretz Israel corresponds to the attribute of Malchut in this world, of Atzilut in the heavens. And all of the sustenance goes through the attribute of Malchut of Atzilut, the last of the emanations of the world of emanation of Malchut, the last of the attributes, and that corresponds directly to the land of Israel. And just as all energy comes from that aspect of the divine attributes, so too it filters through to the land of Israel and then to all other lands of the world. And so therefore it is no wonder that the very land of Eretz Israel, Mahkima, causes one to become more wise. We know that Israel, everybody's a wise guy there. Spiritually, it's like that because Malchut, in fact, gets its attribute from, of course, from the beginning of the 10 emanations. What's the beginning of the 10 emanations? Chokhmah. Chokhmah da Atzilut. Kulam bechokhmah asita. Everything comes from the attribute of wisdom. There starts the divine revelation. And that's why Eretz Israel is the conduit or the recipient of Malchut Atzilut, the last attribute of the highest world of Malchut of Atzilut, and of course Malchut Atzilut receives from the other 9 attributes, and the first one being Chokhmah, which means that Eretz Israel is the recipient of Chokhmah through Malchut, and that is why Eretz Israel has many very spiritual qualities. One of them is the concept of wisdom, both physical and spiritual. And therefore, the rabbi was telling him how great the land of Israel is, which he already knew, but he wanted to hear firsthand. And he told him that the land is so holy that even the rocks are holy. And he was very excited. And in fact, he migrated to Eretz Israel. And he's saying the story after many years of living in the land of Israel. And he said, when I came to the land of Israel, indeed, I saw its greatness, I saw its holiness, I felt its holiness, but there was one thing I wasn't able to see and feel. I picked up the stones and I just did not yet feel the holiness of the land of Israel in the stones themselves, as that original rabbi that came to visit me described to me. And I was very much pained that I was not worthy to see the holiness even in the inanimate objects, in the stones themselves. And I did teshuvah, and I repented, and I tried to refine myself spiritually and slowly remove myself from the materialism of the world, the coarseness of the world. And finally, and the reason why I'm making this seudah, why I'm making this celebration, is because recently I was able to feel the holiness in the stones themselves. I was able to see the divine spark that animates even stone itself. I was able to feel it. In other words, not only through meditative power, not only through the intellect, but actually feel it and see it is a very great and noble thing. We don't all merit that. We may merit to be able to feel it or see it or experience it in some way, maybe from time to time, but certainly every single one of us can feel it and experience it in our mind, meaning to say, when we ponder and meditate and understand that that is indeed the case, that the spiritual animates the physical, the spiritual being godly, and therefore godliness is responsible for the life of everything. We are 3 lines down. And it is the divine, and particularly as we discussed the previous weeks, the tetragrammaton name, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the He, the name Havaya, which Havaya in Hebrew means to bring into existence. Not only does it bring it into existence, but it is responsible for its continued life. Dihine Ktiv, Now, we said before that we are able to actually recognize this. We're actually able to see this, minimally in our mind's eye. How so? Very simple. There is a verse which we quoted very often. The Arizal quotes this very often, and he uses this as a prototype for us to be able to understand the divine. And listen to what he says. The inactive, behold, it's written. There is a verse in Job, in chapter 19, verse 26, that states, from my flesh I will perceive God. What does that mean? From my flesh I will perceive God. Says the Holy Arizal, that we are created in the image of God. Does it not say in the very opening verses of the Bible of Bereshit, Naaseh Adam betzalmenu kedmutenu, let us make man in our image and in our likeness, which means that in some way man mirrors the divine. First of all, in the very most simplest Kabbalistic explanation is that it's based upon the Gemara in Masechet Brachot. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot says, Ma haneshama memala et haguf, kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu memala et ha'olam. Just as the soul fills mehayeh et haguf, just as the soul fills and enlivens the body, so to God, so to speak, fills and enlivens the world. Which means that we see that the Gemara, the sages of the Talmud, make a comparison. We have a pasuk from the prophet. We have the Talmud that make a comparison from man to the divine. The man's soul to the divine, i.e., just as the soul fills and animates the body, so to God fills and animates the world. Which means that there is a relativity over here, that there's a correlation over here. There is we are a mirror of the divine. How so? Says the Holy Arizal, God created the heaven and earth and revealed himself, began to reveal himself through the order of descent, through this ladder, through the 10 emanations. He reflected within himself, as it says in Tikkun Zohar, from you emanates 10 emanations by which you have rectified and created the world. So to man is a mirror image of that, and he also has 10 emanations. And those 10 emanations, from the lower to the highest, from Malchut to the highest Chokhmah, Chokhmah being the wisdom, is then a reciprocal of the 10 emanations from a higher level, and then from a higher level yet still, because all of the 10 emanations are recipients from the 10 emanations from high levels, and high levels still, and high levels still, until the divine itself. And therefore, when we look at ourselves and when we understand that we have these 10 emanations, we understand, and that we, very simply, forget about the 10 emanations. We have a body and we have a soul, and that the soul animates the body, and so too God animates the world, the soul of the world, the life force of the world. So if we look at ourselves and how we function, we can see and understand the handiwork of God and the involvement of God and the dependence of this world to God. Fourth line. Therefore, man has a capacity, since he is created in the image, he has a particular type of mirror. He's a mirror for what occurred above. And thus he can then very easily relate to, at least intellectually, and then spiritually, and even physically relate to and see the divine in everything, because he's contained that aspect of the divine. So he can easily relate to it. It's part of his DNA, and therefore he can relate to godliness. Just as man knows and feels within himself, that the main and primary ingredient of self, is the light and the energy of one's soul. In the bracket it says a very powerful thing. And through man refining himself and working hard to overcome his physical temptation, desire, and laziness, and inflexibility towards wanting to prune himself, to get rid of the dead things, the useless things about us, and then prune it and cause new growth, and to remove the materialism and the coarseness of self, and thus more refine ourselves to feel spirituality. And I told you this before. If a person, for example, wants to hear a faint noise, you got to concentrate very, very, very much. You know, my children make fun of me. You know, when you get older, your hearing is not as acute as it was when you're younger. And you know, from time to time, I ask my children to repeat them. So you can say it again? But they make fun of me and they say, oh, in the reading of the Torah, he hears every little detail, even though it's like 10, 15 meters away from him. And I say, because I'm very focused to hear the reader in order to see if he's read properly or needs to make a mistake. So because of my focus, I try and invest all of my energy into hearing. You become much more attuned and sensitive to what is being heard. Maybe as an indirect hint to the boys, maybe I'm not so attuned and sensitive to what they are saying. But anyway, the point is when a person focuses his attention on something, you become much more sensitive and attuned to whatever that is. Be it a sound, be it when a person wants to see something. Oh, look, do you see that little bee on the flower? And you can't see it in first glance, but when you focus your attention, you can see it. So too in spiritual matters. In spiritual matters, there's a lot that we can see. There's a lot that we can feel, but we don't focus. Focusing means removing all other distractions and focusing all of our attention on a particular thing. In spirituality, that is the case as well. Focusing on spirituality means to say that we're not distracted by the coarseness and materialism of the world, and we begin to focus more on the spirituality. We all of a sudden begin to develop a sensitivity towards it. Just like a person who develops a sensitivity to music, he picks up where a person is off tune. But if you're not paying attention to the music at all, you're not going to pick up anything. But when you begin to focus your attention on the music being played, first of all, you can appreciate the music. The more you train your ear, the more sensitive and attuned you'll be to the most slightest. You know, the conductors are able to pick up. There's 170 people playing. They're able to pick up that flute that he was a tiny bit off. Or that violin is a tiny, that's sensitivity. Why? Because they're so focused and so attuned and so used to it that they pick up. Spiritually, that's the case as well. Unfortunately, we're so used to the materialism that we're so attuned and so used to materialism that we pick up materialism. You know, the people how can hear two or three conversations at one time. They're so attuned to hearing, many people. They're very cluey. That can happen in spirituality, but that takes a bit of work. It takes a bit of refinement. And predominantly focus. One has to focus. When you focus, you exclude everything else that you're not focusing on. If you're focusing on spirituality, you've got to exclude the things that distract us. The materialism of the world, the coarseness of the world, the pleasures and desires of the world. The more we do so, the more we become attuned. Just like that rabbi who worked on himself to even feel the holiness, not only in the synagogues and where Abraham is buried and where the holy Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried, and etc., but even in the very stones themselves, he was able to see, or at least feel physically, the divine light that animates them. We know within ourselves that it is our soul that animates us. It is our soul that gives us life. What does that teach us? It teaches us that the primary ingredient in our lives and in the whole world is spirituality. And thus then it behooves us to focus our attention on the primary thing. It's like a child. A child, it's interesting to note that Maimonides explains in chapter 10 of the Laws of Teshuvah. And he says, one should never serve God. A beginner serves God for reward. You scratch my back, God, I scratch your back. I do what you want me to do, and then you do what I want you to do. I take care of your laws, you take care of me, God. Maimonides says it's a very immature way of serving God. He says, of course, we start off with reward and punishment. We start off with the carrot and the stick. However, to mature further, he says, to serve God truly is like to serve God like Abraham Avinu. How did Abraham Avinu serve God? Truth for the sake of truth's sake, for no other reason, because it is true. That is a very profound and mature way of serving God. Truth for seeking and cleaving to truth for truth's sake. Cleaving to godliness for godliness' sake. Because it is true, because it's the essence, it is the primary ingredient, an essence, essential ingredient behind everything. And therefore it behooves us to connect to it. It says Maimonides is a very interesting thing. And how does one connect to God? How does one come to truly connect, to cleave to God and love God and appreciate godliness? Through the intellect. The greater our expansion of our intellect connectivity to God and understanding of God and his interplay with the world and with us, the greater the appreciation, the greater the connectivity, and the greater the love of God. And this is the main service or the main refinement that we have to work on. So we've got to get to know God. When a person, you want to marry someone, you're meeting someone, you want to marry them, how do you know whether how do you develop a love for them? You get to know them. You got to get to know them. Oh, I love this about you. Oh, I love your smile. I love the way you react. I love how patient you are. I love how this you are. I love how you get to know them. When you get to know them, you develop a love. You develop an appreciation. When you get to know something, how negative it is, then you develop an appreciation how damaging it is. That's why we've got to teach children at a young age morality and what is good, what is bad. And at a young age, we will begin to develop an understanding of things, and then be able to have the proper vessels to make decisions later on in life, what to cleave to and what to distance ourselves from. So Maimonides says a beautiful thing in chapter 10 in the Laws of Teshuvah. Very beautiful. The more expanded our mind is, the more appreciation we have of godliness, the more we can come to love God, the more we can come to cleave to God. It is all dependent upon our level of intellectual understanding. Get to know God. God has left many clues for us here. And remember, as we said before, one of the reasons why God created the world or revealed himself in a particular way, and the Torah and the mitzvot, is to give him himself to us, expose himself to us. He's enabling us to get to know him. And the more you get to know him, the more you love God, the more you appreciate. And then, since that's the greatest ingredient, that is the primary focus of everything, that is the greatest love that we can have, that is the greatest passion and pleasure that we can ever have. As David HaMelech says, Ta'amur ukitov Hashem. Ta'amur, taste, and then you'll come to know and understand how good God is. But if all we're tasting is donuts and smoothies and milkshakes, then we haven't developed any sensitivity or appreciation for spirituality. Ta'amur, says King David, Ur'uki tov Hashem. Taste and see. See. You can see, if not in your eye, in your mind's eye, as Maimonides says. The more we expand our understanding and our intellect, the more we're able to come to appreciate the primary ingredient behind everything. As I say to my children many times, this world is great, isn't it? It's wonderful, isn't it? There's many great and pleasurable things in this world. Absolutely. Then you can well imagine, God created the world, correct? Yes. If God created so many great and pleasurable and wondrous things in this world, how great then and how pleasurable then is just one tiny drop of spirituality. How much more so God himself, not a speck of spirituality, God himself. As it says in the Zohar, it says based upon the verse, Vayipach ba'apav nishmat hayim, God blew in the nostrils of man the breath of life. And the Kabbalah says, Man denafach metochi anafach. He that blows from his innards. Which means that God created the world different than he created man. He created the world through speech. Speech, one can speak for hours. But when he created man, he doesn't say he created man. He blew in his nostrils the breath of life. He didn't blow in the nostrils the breath of life in a leaf, in a flower, or even in an elephant. Only in man. Why? Says the Zohar, Banda nafah mitoch nafah. He that blows from his innards. Meaning to say that the way God created man is different than he created the world. He created the world from his external life source. He created man from his internal life source. The difference between speech and the difference between breathing and blowing comes more from my innards. Therefore, that is why, another reason why man is a mirror of the divine, because he reflects the more inner quality of godliness, the more inner quality of the divine will. As we know, I don't care for this, as we said, I don't care to catch the bus. I'm catching the bus, that's my external will. I'm catching the bus because I need and want to get to work. So everything has an internal will and an external will. The catching the bus is external to my internal will to get to work. Work as well has an internal dimension and external dimension. I want to go to work, that's external. Why? To earn money. That's my internal will. Again, why do I need money? I want money, that external will. The internal will of money is, the breath of the life of money is what it gives me, the ability to sustain my family, to feed my family. So too, when God created the world, that's like catching the bus to get to work, facilitating that man will be on this world, his inner will. And that's why man is created in a way that reflects the innermost dimension of God, life source, or energy, or divine light, as opposed to external. Speech is external. Blowing is internal, which again reflects that man mirrors the internal qualities of God, and therefore we have the capacity to relate to that more so than any other creature, even more so than the angels. We are able to relate to the more inner dimension of the divine light, except we have to focus our energy on absorbing this, beginning intellectually, focusing and coming to know God, recognizing God, because for God has allowed himself to be recognized, to be known, through the world itself, minimally, just through the world. Look at the world, the wondrousness of the world, that the world cannot be without a creator. That's A. And B, through the Torah, the wondrousness of the Torah, that God is revealing his wisdom, not just his creative power. There's a big difference between, I see a tool that a very talented lady created, for example, very nice. I appreciate what she created with her hand. And then me getting to know this lady and finally marrying this lady and appreciating who she is, not only externally, but her more inner part. She will share with me her most inner thoughts, her most inner feelings, her more inner vulnerability, her more spiritual side. And that is a much greater intimacy than seeing what she created with her hands, even though it's very precious and very beautiful. So too with God. The handiwork of God is the world. But God has allowed us a much more intimate glimpse of himself. And that exists through me, myself. Because I am created in that image of the 10 emanations, the breath, the inner part, the blowing that God blew within my nostrils, the breath of life, expresses the inner dimension by whence I came from. And thirdly, from the Torah, that is a glimpse of the divine wisdom. That's why Maimonides says, then we have to work on ourselves. The greater we come to know God, the greater our appreciation, the greater love we have for God. And you gotta get to know God. You gotta know God. You gotta come to understand God. And that is possible. Minimally, by just looking the way we work. And how do we work? Let's see. 4 lines. 5 lines. And that is 5 lines from the top of the paragraph. Through work, i.e., through intellectual toil, and through also greater focus and removing the distractions and the disturbances, a person will come to feel godliness. You'll come to feel godliness. Remember, I told you, and I'll repeat it again, because it's very worthwhile. It's a very worthwhile lesson. And it taught me a lot. When I first learned shahita, to be a shohet, you have to be able to learn how to make a knife, sharp and smooth. Sharp and smooth. And smooth, you use particular type of stones, firstly to sharpen it. And once it's sharp enough, then you got to use a different type of stone that smooths it, makes it very smooth. Why? In order that there will be no nick, that will cause no pain, that the cutting will cause no pain to the animal. If there's a nick, even a slight nick, it causes pain to the animal. That way the cut should be so smooth. And I know for a fact, because I cut my finger with a knife, I didn't feel the cut at all. I felt later on. But I didn't feel the cut at all. When you cut the windpipe and the veins around the animal, that causes the animal to feel, and you do that immediately and without any nicks whatsoever, and there shouldn't be any pausing. The cut has to be smooth without any pausing. You can't just cut a little bit and go. It's not kosher. So you got to learn how to make that knife sharp, but you also got to learn how to feel the knife, and you got to feel it with your fingernails. And one of the ways of feeling, or the most popular way, is feeling with the fingernails. And you got to slowly run your fingernail across the knife, and you got to learn how to feel. So one time I made a knife and I showed it to my teacher, the shohed, and he says, "Look over here. You see over here? There's what's called a lack of smoothness. It wasn't so smooth. It's a little bit rough. Not that there's a dent. There wasn't a dent there, because sometimes you can even see a reflection. One of the ways of looking at a knife is you can see how the light reflects from the point of the knife. Nothing there. It's just a little lack of smoothness at the top of the knife." And I'm feeling it. I said, "I can't feel a thing." And he said, "Put your fingers on my finger like this, and now I will concentrate very good, and I will move my finger across the knife, and you will feel the vibrations." I still couldn't feel it. And then I kept concentrating until I began to feel the vibration that he was talking about. Then it took me 2 weeks for me to learn how to focus my attention to such a degree that my fingernail will be able to feel the most slightest of not irregularity or lack of smoothness. I'm not talking about a dent, that's easy. Not even a fine dent, that's harder. I'm talking about a lack of smoothness. It took me 2 weeks. I thought when I was first learning, I'll never graduate. I'm gonna fail. But it's not true. We're able to focus and learn many things and feel many things. I was able to feel something that 2 weeks ago, a month ago, a year ago, I never thought and dreamt that I'd be able to feel. All of a sudden, I'm beginning to feel something. Why? How did I feel? Am I a new person? Did I get a new finger? Did I take some sort of pill that makes me much more sense? No, very simple. Focus. I learned how to focus. So too with spirituality. You got to learn how to focus. The more you focus, the more you become spiritual sensitive. How is it that you can sell a story to someone, and you can and someone has tears and another person doesn't have tears? There are people who are more sensitive than others by nature. That's true. But spiritually, how come you say the rabbi says a speech about something and it moved this guy and it didn't move this guy? Again, it is true that some people are more sensitive than others by nature. That's a beautiful gift to have. It doesn't mean that the other guy who's less sensitive is not spiritual. On the contrary, that other guy that has to work on himself stronger or more, his achievement is greater. In fact, he actually refines, because he's lower, he refines a lower dimension of which the more sensitive person didn't go there. But anyway, that's for another time. The point is that sometimes the people who are more sensitive, either because it's the divine gift, they were born like that, or they worked on themselves, will be moved by something that is touching or something that is spiritual, and will change their lives in accordance with that. That was the wonderful gift I said about Yitro. If you remember, I gave a shiur called "The True Convert," when truth stares you in the face, about Yitro. And have a look. It's a worthwhile listen. And very briefly, the quality of Yitro was Vayishma Yitro. Yitro heard and he came. He heard what happened to the Jewish people. He heard all of the miracles and he came. Many heard but did not come. Yitro heard and he came. Why? Because he was spiritually sensitive. He already removed a lot of the distractions in his life beforehand. Therefore, when he heard, he acted upon it. Because when truth stares you in the face and you don't do anything about it, there's something wrong with you. There's something lacking with you. You got to work on yourself. You got to change yourself to be able to be more attuned spiritually, more sensitive spiritually, and more focused. And you got to remove all of the distractions. If you're not moved by something spiritual, that means that you're not spiritually sensitive enough. You got to do more work, because godliness can be recognized. And as I said before, for many reasons, it can be recognized minimally. You can just look around the world and see the hand of God, the handiwork of God. Or a little bit more intimate, you can see God as he reflects himself within yourself, within your heart, within the 10 emanations that exist within you. And furthermore, how God has allowed himself, has exposed himself, has allowed himself to have an intimate relationship with you if you choose to learn his Torah and you choose to understand godliness more intimate, as you would come to get to know a spouse and get to know them much better and build a much more intimate relationship and love them and appreciate them, etc., etc. You're not going to marry a stranger on the street. You don't know them. Maybe they're a mass murderer. They may look nice externally. They may look very respectable. Oh, the guy wears a nice, beautiful tie, wears a suit. He must be a businessman. He's not a businessman at all. He's a bank robber. He knows how to hack into your and he's a big fraudster, and he knows how to hack into your identity theft. And he's an expert at it. Just wears a tie and a thing. It looks like a banker. He's a banker, all right. He's a banker, all right. He's banking on other people's money. So you could look at someone who looks very impressive, but you don't really know them. You're not going to marry someone. You're not going to create and trust someone and create an intimate relationship with someone you don't know. You're not going to love someone. You're not going to express and expose your most vulnerable part or trust someone you don't know. You're not going to build an intimate relationship with someone you don't know. So too, you don't know God. Get to know him. Get to know him. People know about cars. People know about so many other things, and yet you don't know about God, that is the primary ingredient about everything. You don't know your soul. How can you not know your soul? Know a little bit about your soul. It is the very life source of you. It is your energy. It is your life. Get to know it. Develop it. Reveal it. And so too with godliness as well. And that's what he's saying here. The body itself is nothing. The body itself cannot exist without the soul. And the proof is, when the soul exits the body, even though all of the limbs are all complete and whole, the eye is still there. And there's and you can transplant many things. You can take many things from a body and use it as spare parts, lavdil, excuse the expression. Nonetheless, even though he has eyes, he has a mouth, can't see, can't speak. Why? Because the main dimension is the spiritual dimension. And as those who've read books about out-of-body experience, and those people who left the body and came either back to the body or have revealed themselves to their relatives, say interesting thing. They see everything, they hear everything. When the soul leaves the body, they don't have an eye. They don't have a mouth, because it was the soul that gave the ability of the eye to see and the mouth to speak and the ears to hear in the first instance. Now the guy who's sitting, who's deceased, he's got the ear, he's got the eyes, he's got the mouth, but he can't see, he can't hear, and he can't speak. Okay, we've run out of time. We'll continue next week by the grace of God.